There is nothing more commonly taken for granted than that there are certain principles, both speculative and practical, for they speak of both, universally agreed upon by all mankind, which therefore they argue must needs be the constant impressions which the soul of men receive in their first beings, and which they bring into the world with them, as necessarily and really as they do any of their inherent faculties. This argument, drawn from universal consent, has this misfortune in it, that if it were true in matter of fact, that there were certain truths wherein all mankind agreed, it would not prove them innate. If there can be any other way shown how men may come to the universal agreement in the things they do consent in, which I presume may be done. But, which is worse, this argument of universal consent, which is made use of to prove innate principles, seems to me a demonstration that there are none such, because there are none to which all mankind give a universal assent. I shall begin with the speculative, and instance in those magnified principles of demonstration. Whatsoever is, and it is impossible for the same thing to be and not to be, which of all others I think have the most allowed title to innate. These have so settled a reputation of maxims universally received that it will no doubt be thought strange if any one should seem to question it. But yet I take liberty to say that these propositions are so far from having a universal assent that there are a great part of mankind to whom they are not so much as known. For first, it is evident that all children and idiots have not the least apprehension or thought of them, and the want of that is enough to destroy that universal assent, which must needs be the necessary concomitant of all innate truths. It seeming to me near a contradiction to say that there are truths imprinted on the soul which it perceives or understands not, imprinting, if it signify anything, being nothing else but the making certain truths to be perceived. No proposition can be said to be true in the mind which it never yet knew, which it was never yet conscious of. If truths can be imprinted on the understanding without being perceived, I can see no difference there can be between any truths the mind is capable of knowing in respect of their original. They must all be innate, or all adventitious. In vain shall a man go about to distinguish them. He therefore that talks of innate notions in the understanding cannot, if he intend thereby any distinct sort of truths, mean such truths to be in the understanding as it never perceived, and is yet wholly ignorant of. For if these words, to be in the understanding, have any propriety, they signify to be understood. If therefore these two propositions, whatsoever is, and it is impossible for the same thing to be and not to be, are by nature imprinted, children cannot be ignorant of them. Infants, and all that have souls, must necessarily have them in their understandings, know the truth of them, and assent to it. To avoid this, it is usually answered that all men know and assent to them when they come to the use of reason, and this is enough to prove them innate. To apply this answer with any tolerable sense to our present purpose, it must signify one of these two things: either that as soon as men come to the use of reason, these supposed native inscriptions come to be known and observed by them, or else that the use and exercise of men's reasons assists them in the discovery of these principles, and certainly makes them known to them. If they mean that by the use of reason men may discover these principles, and that this is sufficient to prove them innate, their way of arguing will stand thus, namely, that whatever truths reason can certainly discover to us, and make us firmly assent to, those are all naturally imprinted on the mind, and by this means there will be no difference between the maxims of the mathematicians and theorems they deduce from them. All must be equally allowed innate, they being all discoveries made by the use of reason, and truths that a rational creature may certainly come to know, if he apply his thoughts rightly that way. But how can these men think the use of reason necessary to discover principles that are supposed innate, when reason, if we may believe them, is nothing else but the faculty of deducing unknown truths from principles or propositions that are already known? That certainly can never be thought innate which we have need of reason to discover, unless, as I have said, we will have all the certain truths that reason ever teaches us to be innate. we may as well think the use of reason necessary to make our eyes discover visible objects, as that there should be need of reason, or the exercise thereof, to make the understanding see what is originally engraven in it. And I think those who give this answer will not be forward to affirm that the knowledge of this maxim, that it is impossible for the same thing to be and not to be, is a deduction of our reason. For this would be to destroy that bounty of nature they seem so fond of, whilst they make the knowledge of those principles to depend on the labor of our thoughts. For all reasoning is search and casting about, and requires pains and application. And how can it with any tolerable sense be supposed that what was imprinted by nature as the foundation and guide of our reason should need the use of reason to discover it? Those who will take the pains to reflect with a little attention on the operations of the understanding will find that this ready assent of the mind to some truths depends not either on native inscription or the use of reason, but on a faculty of the mind quite distinct from both of them, as we shall see hereafter.